What are you making of the kind of market activity we're seeing right now?
We're seeing quite a bit of speculative position taking. We saw the banks having a good run, and we've seen now speculators exiting and looking at the companies which have not actually reported results.
I was saying earlier that commentary has been that we've got speculators leaving the market and strategic investors taking long-term positions on value stocks in particular. Eric, how are you positioning yourself in the market right now?
We've seen a lot of interest around the dividend, and that's continuing to play a lot of the trading that is going on now. The foreign investors particularly are quite keen on the positions longer term. We've been seeing the locals playing short term, but still some of the local investors also starting to especially the local fund managers starting to come in focusing on a longer term perspective. So overall, we think the market is probably going to trade around these levels, maybe easing off a little bit as the dividends get paid.
In terms of your approach to the markets, though, I mean, how are you positioning yourself specifically if you're looking at your portfolio composition?
We've seen some of the companies actually easing off quite significantly. Some of them in terms of valuation, they are quite attractive at these levels. Kenyan is one of them that we really like. Seckam investments, we still think it's quite a value proposition. We are actually selling off East African breweries. We think the story is very good, but we think at these levels it's actually overpriced. But management is actually doing a very good job in that company. We like British American Tobacco. So for the sin companies, actually, you know, if you compare East African breweries and BAT, we like BAT for the dividend yield.
Especially where you've got some value plays coming onto the table as well. I mean, if you're looking at the likes of a Kenya Power, it firmed over 1% on Friday's session to close at 14 shillings 40. It's retreated 7.7% in 2012. And that many traders out there saying marking a 1,200 basis point of underperformance versus the NSE 20 index for the 2012 period. Are you seeing any value in the likes of a KPLC?
Yes, certainly. If you compare KPLC with Kenyan, we think there's a lot of upside on KPLC. Although for the sector in general, we are a bit concerned, especially with regards to the investments that they need to make in order to really meet the demand that is anticipated. So from that point of view, overall for the sector, we feel it's a hold despite the growth momentum. We think they probably have to be conservative with regards to dividend.
Okay, so we've got East African breweries on the one end of the continuum trading at a 1,200 basis points of outperformance in 2012 when compared to the NSE 20 index. And on the flip side, KPLC trading with an underperformance to that index as well. Let's put some spotlight on Scan Group because it rallied over 3% on Friday's session. It's closed at 47 shillings and it's rallied 13.25% in the 2012 period so far. It's sitting at an 8-month closing high. The value you're seeing in Scan Group right now, Eric?
Yeah, it's certainly quite thinly traded, but I think if you're looking at the controlling shareholder, WPP, and the Africa story that Scan Group actually represents, we think Scan Group as a longer-term play is actually quite well positioned, not just within East Africa, but increasingly now they're expanding in West Africa and Southern Africa as well. So for a very longer-term investor, I think it's a value play. Obviously, the valuation is quite expensive compared to the market, but we still think that's a worthwhile premium to pay. They are reporting their full-year earnings early April, and we expect to see solid numbers on that.
Well, markets clearly anticipating strong numbers out of that company. Let's look at a stock like Chumi. It's rallied 22% year to date with a rise of 37%, you know, from March the 2nd through to March the 14th, before we've seen this profit-taking take over like we saw on Thursday and Friday's session. What do you make of Uchumi? Because, of course, it was that talk about a dividend payout, you know, after nearly 7 years that was the catalyst for the upward spike that we've seen on the share price, Eric. But, you know, you've got to question whether a lot of the upward movement has been on the back of speculative activity or real fundamental support.
I think a lot of it is speculative, but I think there is an underlying basis for that. If you look at the dividend, I think that's very speculative. You're not sure really whether they're going to pay the dividend, especially with regards to the expansion that they're undertaking. But overall, if you look at the business, it's really come a long way since it came out of receivership in terms of the quality of products that it's now stocking, the variety, in terms of the traffic that it's actually getting. So overall, it's a good story, and we think of the next 1 year in terms of the retail sector in the Kenyan market and also within the wider East Africa market. It's obviously a good stock, and we think there's actually additional room on that. But I think the dividend bid will probably not come in as aggressively as maybe the market anticipates.
Yeah.